So, what happens when a guy who sees himself as a nice guy starts to feel like the entire dating world is completely rigged against him? Well, today we're diving into the core arguments from Land of the Losers. It's a collection of essays from an author who just calls himself Niceguy, and he lays out this really personal and, pretty provocative case for why he believes kindness doesn't get you love, it just gets you used. Right from the jump, the author introduces himself with this very specific persona. He really wants you to see him as this helpful, super friendly, accommodating guy. You know, the classic nice guy. This line right here, it sets the entire stage for the conflict that he's about to unpack. So, who is the man behind this nice guy name? Well, he doesn't really stay anonymous. In fact, to get his whole argument, you first have to understand how he sees himself. He gives us a very detailed self-portrait, and it's meant to frame every single one of his experiences. He lays out his credentials, and, on paper they paint a picture of a really successful person. An advanced degree, a good income, he's multilingual. He's pretty much telling us, look, I did everything I was supposed to do. And this profile is so important because it's the foundation for his entire grievance.
In all of this, his successful background, his self-described nice guy personality, it all builds toward the absolute heart of his work. It's a concept that he came up with himself, a phrase that becomes the lens for how he sees his entire romantic life.
So, here it is. This is his definition. A disposable nice guy is someone who feels like he's constantly being used for his kindness and his resources. He's that reliable friend you call to fix your computer or help you move, but he's always stuck in the friend zone. In his mind, he's useful, but he's never desirable. And that feeling of being used, it leads to this deep sense of betrayal. And you can see it in this quote, right? I mean, you can just feel the frustration boiling over. He's basically arguing that the promise he was raised on, that if you're a good, dependable man, you'll eventually find love, he thinks it's not just wrong, but a total malicious lie. This right here captures the contradiction that fuels his whole argument. On one side, you have the script that society taught him, be kind, be generous, and you will be loved. But on the other side, you've got his actual life experience, where those exact same qualities seem to be what got him disqualified from romance altogether. So for him, the crucial point is this. It's not just a run of bad luck. He thinks it's a systemic problem. He comes to the conclusion that the entire dating game in the West is rigged against guys like him. That it's all structured to serve what women want, while men are just treated as disposable assets. Now, to prove this isn't just him being bitter, he lays out a series of personal stories, like they're exhibits in a courtroom. It's like he's a lawyer making a case. And his very first piece of evidence? It hits really close to home. It's the story of his own sister and her so-called nice guy husband. Okay, so he sets the scene. We've got his sister, who he describes in, let's just say, some pretty unflattering terms, and she's married to a nice guy. Now, at first, that seems to totally contradict his whole theory, but then he drops what he sees as the big twist. The husband is incredibly rich. And he uses this little snippet of gossip he supposedly overheard as his smoking gun. For him, this isn't just some catty comment. He sees it as a confession, proof that the marriage is just a financial deal, not a real partnership based on love. And this is how he turns it around to make his point. See, far from disproving his theory, his brother-in-law's marriage becomes the exception that proves the rule. In his worldview, a nice guy can land a successful woman, but only if he brings a massive financial advantage to the table. Kindness by itself? Nope, not nearly enough. All right, on to his next exhibit. This one is designed to be the polar opposite of himself and his brother-in-law. This is his cousin. And this is where he really tries to sharpen the contrast between the kind of man he thinks women say they want and the kind they actually go for. This side-by-side comparison, this is really the core of his argument in the section. You've got him, the educated, successful guy who feels like he has the romantic appeal of a wet dog. And then you've got his cousin, who he paints as basically a criminal, and he's just effortlessly successful with women. The implication is pretty clear. Women are drawn to the thug, not the nice guy. And to back this up, he tells a very specific story. It's at a family Christmas gathering. He says he watches his cousin treat his beautiful girlfriend, Kara, with just open contempt. He's rude to her, totally thoughtless, and completely dismissive. And here's his big takeaway from that situation. In his eyes, the blame isn't just on his cousin for being a jerk. No, he argues that Kara is part of the problem, that by staying with this guy, she is actively rewarding his bad behavior, and by doing that, she's keeping this whole cycle going. This all leads us to his final, and honestly by far the most personal exhibit. He dedicates a huge chunk of his writing to his ex-fiancée. It was a relationship he describes in really visceral terms, calling it a journey to the depths of hell and back.
So he starts by painting this picture of the woman he fell for. She's beautiful, strong-willed, seductive. But he immediately contrasts that with her dating history, which he says was just filled with guys who treated her badly. He was, in his words, her first nice guy. But over time, he came to believe the person he fell in love with was just a carefully built image, an elaborate facade. And he lays out this incredibly volatile relationship, and you can sort of see it mapped out here. It starts with these amazing highs, but also terrible lows, all in the first 6 months. There were constant breakups. Then, what he thought was the breakthrough, she confesses that she's just scared because she's never been treated so well. He believed her, the relationship seemed to stabilize, and so he just doubled down on his affection. He thought they'd finally turned a corner.
But his perspective on all that totally changed. He came to the conclusion that his kindness didn't actually heal her. Instead, he believes it basically gave her a green light to act out without any consequences. In his mind, his commitment became a weakness that she could just exploit. And this is what he describes as the climax of the relationship. He uses this incredibly raw and aggressive language to portray what he sees as the ultimate act of emotional manipulation, something that finally led to their engagement. So after laying out all this evidence, his sister, his cousin, his ex-fiancée, the author doesn't really offer a neat solution or a 5-step plan for other nice guys. Instead, for his final move, he turns the spotlight directly back onto the reader with a challenge. He's pretty upfront about his goal here. He says he's not just complaining. He wants his story to be a kind of framework, a prompt for other people, especially other men, to really take a hard look at their own experiences with dating and the stories they've been told by society. And so he ends with this direct challenge. After making his whole case, a life of feeling used, rejected, and manipulated, he basically hands you the file and asks you to be the judge. His story becomes this raw case study in a much bigger and, often really fraught debate about modern relationships. He leaves you to draw the final conclusion for yourself. Where exactly is that line between sanity, decency, misogyny, and self-respect?